Hey guys, today we're going to be painting some Icelandic poppies. Now these are really easy flowers to paint in a loose watercolour style and they're great for beginners. We're going to be using a really sunny summery colour palette. Let's get started. Alright guys, now we're ready to start painting. Now for this video I will be using Winsor Newton Professional grade watercolour paints. So I buy these in tubes and then I squeeze them out into this palette. I will also be using Archer's watercolour paper. This is in a block. It means that the edges are glued together. It will just hold them still in the pad. So this is a 100% cotton cold press paper. And then I will be using Princeton Heritage 40-50 round brushes. I'm probably going to use size 8. I've decided for this one. So let's get started then. California poppies are really sunny, really summery flowers. So we're going to be using a colour scheme of yellows and oranges. So I'm going to mix up cadmium yellow to start and just pull it into this well here. This is one of my favourite yellows because it's actually a little bit opaque, so it creates a really nice thick vibrancy on the page. It mixes up quite thick colours with other ones as well. And then I'm going to add a little cadmium orange to it, just enough to make it a bit sunny without actually making it orange. Okay, and then plenty of water. We want this to be quite a thin mix. Load up your brush and then take it over to your paper, and what we're going to do is hold it quite flat to the page and then scrub back and forth. So this is one I'm calling the wiggle stroke. I've probably made that name up, but it's basically a back and forth motion like a zigzag. And we're going to work around an imagined central point of the flower. So if we imagine the centre is here, then we put the brush down and drag it back and forth to create a petal like that. And then I'm going to rinse that off a bit and do the next one around the central point. Come over here, maybe use a bit more water, and then another one at the bottom. There we go. What I'm going to do is lengthen this top one to match. And then we're going to use a bit more colour in the centre and just allow it to bleed out. You can also touch it against some edges for a bit of contrast. And that already looks super summery. Next, we're going to add some more cadmium orange to this. It's still a very yellowy orange, and we're going to do another one here. Now you can see I'm purposefully leaving these with the jagged edges because poppies have very jagged petals. So they're really well suited to this, you know, carefree, loose floral style. Now add a bit more orange to this last bit to mix up the colours. You can see I'm painting the petals separately but allowing them to touch in places. That bleeds lovely. And then we can add more paint there in the middle and do a couple of edges as well. What you can do is get a little bit of paint on your brush and then just wiggle along the edges for a bit of texture. I'm going to paint one more here. I think I'm going to go for back to a yellow again. Try and get a mid-tone between the two. Oh yeah, that's lovely. So you can see I'm starting with the darkest one and then mixing that out into different values. Just use plenty of water for this. It really helps flowers stop looking too blobby if you're constantly changing up the contrast. Otherwise they all tend to turn into a sort of donut of the same colour. Donut? Just sort of ugly blob thing. There we go. And I'm going to add a bit more pure cadmium yellow here. Keep it nice and summery. Alright, excellent. Now, while that dries, what we will do is focus on the stems. Now, California poppies have lovely thick stems with little hairs coming off them, so we're going to get that effect. So I'm using a sap green here. Any green mixed with yellow is perfect. I'm going to add a little cadmium yellow to it, just for brightness and to make it a little bit opaque. And then we're going to pull the stems down. So working from the center of the flower, we're just going to pull the stems, and it doesn't matter if they're not perfectly even. I'm going to allow that to touch there for a little bleed, and then we're just going to pull quite a thick stem down without worrying about making it perfect. Down there. And then we're going to do the same for the other ones. I'm probably going to try and cross these. And then pull a third one down there. Okay, and then to get the little hairy edges, what we're going to do is load up plenty of paint just on the tip of the brush and then use it to flick out as we go. We want this to look a bit random, so try and change the direction, the length, just keep alternating sides. Some of them you're flicking out, some of them you're flicking into the centre. We don't want it to look like it's got a line of perfect hairs coming down the side. You need to work fairly quickly with this anyway to make sure that the stem itself doesn't dry up before you have time to do this. You can see I'm really not overthinking it here. This is actually a weirdly really soothing way to paint, just little flicks, and you can just forget about the stress of the day. Now if you see that they're all getting kind of the same length, you can just go back in and lengthen a few random ones and keep changing the direction that they're pointing in. It's quite a good practice anyway in terms of brush control and making sure that it's going in the direction that you want it to. So it's quite a good exercise when you're learning to paint as well. I'm going to pull a couple of leaves out as well. Now they have kind of rough jagged leaves as well, so we're going to just mimic that. So I'm going to pull out a stem, get a nice loose mix, and then just pull out in a few thick abstract strokes. Darken that up a little bit and then just run that through the middle to allow it to blend out. And then this time I'm going to add a little more yellow to the mix and do the bottom half. You can see I'm just starting at the stem and pulling out. And that's creating quite a nice jagged effect. Do another one here. And then I'm going to really lighten the value for that one and let it pull across. Again, these are great leaves for loose painting because you don't need to overthink them. There we go. While I've got a little green on my brush, what I'm going to do is load it up on the tip and then just paint a little four shape there. It's almost like a plus with a hole in the middle, because poppies have actually kind of slightly green centres. It's still a bit wet. What we're going to do is let this dry and come back to it, and then we're going to add the stamen on top. Okay, now we're ready to do the stamen. So I've gone down to a size 5 for this, and we're just going to be using the sap green mixture. So I'm going to load up with that. And then we essentially want to do a little flicking motion out from the centre. And we're just going to pull out around the little green bits. You can see that sometimes I'm going out and sometimes I'm coming in. I'm varying up the length, the direction. I'm going to allow some of them to cross. That's a really good way to make it look more full, is to allow some of them to cross. And if you see any bits where they're all a similar length, you can go back in and put some longer ones on. And then we're going to use the tip of the brush and just dab little dots. Now you can see that I'm going back over any bits that are a bit too clean and neat and just adding some dots that are further out, some dots that are further in, until we get a nice organic irregular shape. I'm going to add some more yellow for the next one so that it's a more yellowy green, and then we're just going to do the exact same thing. You can see it helps to use a slightly smaller brush just to get a bit of variation in that stroke size. And again, the same thing with these, I'm not overthinking this, I'm not spending ages worrying about where to place the lines. They're just a little flick action from the wrist and then we're done with. I think this is still a little bit damp, but I'm very impatient, so I'm going to use a slightly thicker green in the hope that it won't spread too far. It's actually not too bad. And then we're back again with the dots. And then I'm just going to darken that little plus back up now. Maybe there as well. Okay, and there we're done with the California poppies. Alright, all done, and here they are. This one looks amazing. We've used a really clever composition where we use 3 individual flowers and then we arrange them in a sort of triangle shape. It's a really simple composition to use, but really effective. We've got some really good colour mixes going on, some wet on wet detail, and then some really small details in the stamen centres and on the little spiky hairy stems as well. If you liked this tutorial, please subscribe. I'll be posting a new one every week from now on. And you can also share your work with me on Instagram and tag me. I would love to see what you create. We'll see you next time, guys.